The scissors made a sharp snip as they cut through natural black hair. Derek Patterson held the severed strands up like a trophy, his face twisted into a satisfied smirk. The woman sitting in the hotel chair remained perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed straight ahead as chunks of her hair fell to the marble floor. "There," Derek announced to the shocked lobby full of guests. "Now you look professional enough for our establishment." The woman slowly turned her head to face him. Her voice was calm, almost whisper-quiet. "Are you finished?" Derek wiped the scissors on a towel, clearly pleased with himself. "With your little makeover?" "Yeah, I think that does it. Much better." "Good," she said, reaching into her purse, "because now it's my turn." Her phone screen lit up, displaying words that would change everything. Washington Hospitality Group, CEO portal. Hit subscribe right now because you need to see what happens next, and drop a comment if you've ever been treated like this. What Derek didn't know was that everything was being recorded, and someone very important was watching. 3 hours earlier, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curved driveway of the Grand Vista Hotel. The morning sun gleamed off the building's glass facade as Dr. Simone Washington stepped out, carrying only a simple leather handbag and small rolling suitcase. Her appearance was deliberately understated, a navy blazer, minimal jewelry, and her natural hair styled in a neat twist. "Pick me up at 6 p.m. sharp," she told her driver, adjusting her blazer. "And remember what we discussed." The middle-aged man nodded knowingly. "Nobody knows you're here, Ms. Washington." "Got it." Simone walked through the revolving doors into the marble-lined lobby. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across expensive furniture arranged in intimate seating areas. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but she was here because the numbers told a different story. At the front desk, Maria Santos looked up with a professional smile. The young Latina woman's name tag read "Front Desk Supervisor," and her warm brown eyes showed genuine kindness. "Welcome to Grand Vista. How can I help you today?" "I have a reservation under Johnson," Simone said, placing her credit card on the counter. Maria's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, but her smile faltered slightly. She glanced toward the manager's office, then leaned closer. "Ma'am, I should probably mention that Mr. Patterson has been in one of his moods today. He's already had 3 complaints about staff not maintaining what he calls proper standards." Maria's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Just wanted to give you a heads up." Simone's trained eye caught the nervous energy in Maria's voice. This was exactly the kind of thing she'd come to investigate. Corporate had been receiving anonymous complaints about the Grand Vista's management style, but nothing concrete enough to act on. "Thank you for the warning," Simone said, accepting her keycard. "I appreciate the honesty." As Maria processed the check-in, Simone scanned the lobby with professional interest. The hotel was undeniably beautiful, but something felt off. She noticed that every person in a management uniform was white, while the housekeeping staff she glimpsed were predominantly people of color. The guest services team behind the concierge desk was entirely white as well. Near the elevator bank, she overheard a hushed conversation between 2 front desk clerks. "Did you see what happened to Kevin yesterday?" one whispered. "Patterson wrote him up for his unprofessional appearance. Kevin's been here 3 years. His hair again? Always his hair. But watch him say nothing when Brad comes in late for the 3rd time this week." The elevator doors opened, and Simone stepped inside, her mind already cataloging the warning signs. In her room on the 12th floor, she set her laptop on the desk and opened her secure connection to the Washington Hospitality Group internal system. The data that appeared on her screen painted a troubling picture. Employee turnover at Grand Vista was 15% higher than company average. Customer satisfaction scores showed unusual patterns, with complaints specifically mentioning unwelcoming staff attitudes and discriminatory treatment. Most telling were the HR reports that had been buried in routine filings. 3 formal complaints about Derek Patterson in the past 18 months, all involving treatment of minority employees. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Carter, the company's HR director. Board meeting moved to 4 p.m. Need your decision on Patterson's situation by the end of day. The lawyers are getting nervous about potential liability. Simone changed out of her business attire into casual clothes, removing her jewelry and letting her hair down into its natural state. She needed to see how the hotel really operated when they thought nobody important was watching. As she prepared to head back downstairs, she had no idea that her simple decision to work in the lobby would trigger a confrontation that would change everything. At 2 o'clock, the Grand Vista lobby hummed with quiet afternoon activity. Business travelers tapped on laptops while tourists studied maps and brochures. Simone had chosen a comfortable armchair near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her laptop open as she reviewed quarterly reports that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of the hotel's management practices. She was so focused on the data that she didn't notice Derek Patterson approaching until his shadow fell across her screen. The general manager stood with his arms crossed, flanked by James Mitchell, the hotel's security chief. James, a tall black man in his mid-40s, looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Excuse me, miss," Derek said, his voice carrying an edge of authority that demanded attention. "I'm going to need to see some identification and proof that you're actually a guest here." Simone looked up from her laptop, taking in Derek's perfectly pressed suit and the condescending expression on his face. Around them, other guests continued their activities undisturbed, despite many of them also using the lobby's complimentary Wi-Fi without being questioned. "I'm sorry," she said calmly. "We've had reports of people using our lobby facilities who aren't paying guests. This is a private establishment with exclusive amenities." Derek's eyes narrowed as he gestured toward her laptop. "So I need to verify your status." Simone glanced around the lobby, noting that at least 6 other people were using laptops and phones on the hotel's Wi-Fi. All of them were white. None of them had been approached by management. "I showed my keycard when I came down from my room," she said, keeping her voice level. "The front desk staff saw me." Derek's jaw tightened. Keycards can belong to anyone. They get lost, stolen, shared. James here will escort you to the front desk for proper verification. James shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing the problematic nature of the situation. "Sir, maybe we could just call the front desk to confirm." "Are you questioning my judgment, James?" Derek's voice carried a warning that made the security chief step back. Simone closed her laptop and stood gracefully. Even in her casual clothes, she carried herself with quiet dignity that seemed to irritate Derek further. "It's fine," she said to James, whose discomfort was obvious. "I'll go to the desk." The walk across the lobby felt longer than usual. Other guests turned to watch the unusual spectacle of a black woman being escorted by security for the crime of existing in the hotel's public space. Whispered conversations followed in their wake. At the front desk, Maria's face went pale when she saw the approaching group. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled up the reservation system. "Ms. Johnson, I'm so sorry about this," Maria said quietly, her voice filled with embarrassment. "Your reservation is right here." "Room 1214, checked in this morning." Derek leaned over the counter, studying the screen with exaggerated scrutiny. "What room number?" he demanded. "I don't think that's necessary to announce publicly," Simone replied. "Room number, now." Derek's voice had risen slightly, drawing more attention from nearby guests. Simone provided the information, watching Derek's face as he verified her status in the system. She could see the moment when he realized she was indeed a legitimate guest, but instead of backing down, his expression hardened. "Well, you may be a guest," he said slowly, "but there's still the matter of your overall presentation." The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Even the background music felt quieter as Derek prepared to cross a line that would change everything. "Your hair," Derek said, his voice carrying across the marble lobby like a slap. "It's completely unprofessional. It doesn't match the image we maintain here at Grand Vista." Audible gasps rippled through the nearby guests. An elderly white couple at the concierge desk turned to stare. Two business travelers looked up from their phones, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock. Maria's hand flew to cover her mouth. "Are you asking me to change my natural hair?" Simone's voice remained steady, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Derek gestured broadly toward the other guests scattered throughout the lobby. "Look around. Everyone else presents themselves appropriately. Professional, refined. We have standards here that all our guests are expected to maintain while using our common areas." Simone followed his gesture, taking in the scene. A blonde woman in yoga pants sat curled up on a sofa with her laptop. A man in wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt worked at a corner table. Another guest wore flip-flops and a baseball cap while reading a newspaper. None of them had been questioned about their appearance. "I see," Simone said quietly. "And what exactly do you suggest I do about my hair?" Derek's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from having what he thought was a brilliant idea. "Tell you what, I'll help you fix this little problem right now." He turned toward James, who had gone completely rigid beside him. "James, we keep scissors at the concierge desk for guest emergencies, don't we?" James's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Sir, I don't think that's—" "Consider this an emergency," Derek interrupted, his confidence growing as he warmed to his theme. "A presentation emergency that's affecting the entire atmosphere of our lobby." The business travelers had their phones out now, recording. The elderly couple moved closer, not wanting to miss the unfolding drama. A small crowd was beginning to form, drawn by the unusual commotion and Derek's increasingly loud voice. "You will not touch my hair," Simone said, each word crisp and clear. Derek straightened his tie, his face flushed with the power he felt he wielded. "Ma'am, you have exactly two choices here. You can fix your appearance to meet our establishment's standards, or you can leave the property immediately. Those are your only options." A woman near the elevator whispered urgently to her companion, "Someone should call the police." Another guest muttered, "This is insane." "He can't do this." Derek strode toward the concierge desk with the confidence of a man who had never faced real consequences for his actions. The young woman behind the desk looked terrified as he demanded the scissors they kept for package emergencies and guest services. "James," Derek called out, holding up the silver scissors like a weapon. "Help the lady to her seat." James looked like a man being asked to participate in his own execution. His loyalty to his job warred visibly with his moral compass, sweat beading on his forehead despite the lobby's perfect climate control. "Sir, I really don't think we should be doing this," he tried one more time. Derek's face hardened into the expression of a man whose authority had been questioned once too often. "Do your job, James, or start looking for another one. It's that simple." The threat hung in the air like poison. James had a family to support, a mortgage to pay, and jobs for black men his age weren't easy to find. His shoulders sagged as he gently placed a hand on Simone's elbow. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice filled with apology and shame. Simone looked directly into James's eyes, seeing the trapped desperation there. At that moment, she made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. "It's okay, James," she said softly, placing her hand briefly over his. "I understand." Her compassion for James, even as she was being humiliated, seemed to break something in the watching crowd. Several people were openly filming now, their faces showing a mixture of horror and disbelief. Simone walked calmly to the ornate chair Derek had indicated, her back straight and her head held high. She sat down with the grace of someone taking a throne rather than submitting to degradation. Derek approached with the scissors, practically vibrating with satisfaction. "Just a little trim," he announced to the watching crowd. "Make you look respectable enough for a place like this." The lobby had fallen into the kind of silence that precedes either violence or revelation. Phones were raised, cameras focused, and everyone held their breath as Derek reached for the first section of Simone's natural hair. The scissors opened with a metallic whisper that somehow seemed to echo off the marble walls. The first cut sent a thick strand of Simone's hair tumbling to the marble floor. Derek held it up like a trophy, grinning at his handiwork. The crowd watched in stunned silence as he made a second cut, then a third, leaving Simone's hair jagged and uneven. "There," Derek announced, stepping back to admire his destruction. "Much better. Now you fit in with the kind of establishment this is." Simone sat perfectly still for a moment, then calmly brushed the loose hair from her shoulders. She stood with fluid grace, as if she had just received a professional styling rather than a public humiliation. "Are you finished?" she asked, her voice carrying an odd note of anticipation. Derek wiped the scissors on a towel from the concierge desk, clearly pleased with himself. "With your makeover?" "Yeah, I think that does it perfectly." "Good," Simone said, reaching into her purse, "because now it's my turn." She pulled out her phone, and the screen that lit up made several people in the crowd gasp. In clear view was a corporate portal displaying Washington Hospitality Group, Emergency Management Protocol. Derek's confident smile began to falter as Simone tapped the screen. The phone rang exactly once before a crisp voice answered. "Rebecca Carter, Human Resources. How can I help you?" "Rebecca, it's Simone," she said calmly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent lobby. "I need you to implement Protocol 7 at Grand Vista Hotel, effective immediately." Derek's face went white. The name Simone Washington was starting to register with the crowd, phones rising higher as people began to understand what they were witnessing. "Yes, I'm here now," Simone continued into the phone. "Ground floor lobby. No, I'm fine, but we have a serious situation that requires immediate action." "Wait," Derek stammered, taking a step backward. "Simone!" "Washington?" The crowd erupted. Crowd. A guest near the elevators shouted, "Holy shit, that's Simone Washington!" "She owns this whole chain." Another voice called out, "This is going viral right now." Simone kept talking to Rebecca, her voice steady and professional despite her butchered hair. "Yes, Derek Patterson. Employment terminated immediately. I want security to escort him from the property within the next 10 minutes. Derek staggered as if he'd been physically struck. This can't be happening. You're just some what? Simone asked, lowering her phone for a moment. Some black woman who doesn't know her place? She approached him calmly, holding up her phone to show her corporate identification clearly displayed on the screen. Let me properly introduce myself. Dr. Simone Washington, Chief Executive Officer of Washington Hospitality Group. I own this hotel. I own 46 others just like it. I employ over 12,000 people across 17 states. The crowd was going wild now, phones everywhere, people live streaming to thousands of viewers. Someone shouted, "This has 50,000 views already." Another voice yelled, "I'm sharing this everywhere." And you, Simone said, looking directly at Derek, just committed assault and battery against me on camera in my own lobby. Derek opened and closed his mouth like a fish, no words coming out. The scissors clattered to the floor from his nerveless fingers. Maria stepped forward from behind the front desk, tears in her eyes. Ms. Washington, I am so sorry. I should have said something. I should have. Maria Santos, Simone said warmly, you did absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, Maria will be serving as acting general manager effective immediately. The applause from the crowd was deafening. Within 30 minutes of the video hitting social media, every major news outlet in the country was scrambling to cover the story. The hashtag #HairJustice was trending #1 on Twitter with over 500,000 tweets. TikTok videos of the incident were racking up millions of views, and Instagram stories were spreading the clip faster than the platforms could track. At CNN headquarters, anchor Sarah Carter stared directly into the camera with barely controlled anger. We're following breaking news out of Chicago, where the CEO of a major hotel chain was assaulted by her own employee in a shocking incident caught on multiple cameras. The screen split to show viral clips from different angles as Sarah continued. Dr. Simone Washington, who owns Washington Hospitality Group, was having her hair forcibly cut by General Manager Derek Patterson after he claimed her natural hair was quite unprofessional. On Fox News, the tone was markedly different. Conservative pundit Michael Roberts leaned back in his chair with a skeptical expression. Now, folks, we need to look at both sides of this story. Maybe there's more context we're not seeing. Perhaps company grooming standards were actually being enforced. His liberal counterpart, Jennifer Martinez, looked incredulous. Michael, what context justifies cutting someone's hair without their consent? This is assault, plain and simple. I'm just saying we shouldn't rush to judgment, Roberts replied. These viral videos can be very misleading. Social media was exploding with reactions across the political spectrum. Tweets flooded in by the thousands. Simone Washington is a queen, justice served. And this is what real power looks like, mixed with darker responses. Fake news setup. This was obviously staged. And another race hoax for attention. The comment sections became battlegrounds. Users shared their own stories of workplace discrimination, while others dismissed the incident as manufactured outrage. The video had been shared over 2 million times within the first hour. At Washington Hospitality Group headquarters, an emergency board meeting was already underway. The company's stock price had dropped 4% in after-hours trading as investors worried about the public relations nightmare and potential legal liability. Board member Robert Hayes slammed his hand on the conference table. This is a disaster. Our reputation is in free fall. How did we not know about Patterson's history? Rebecca Carter, the HR director, looked exhausted as she spread files across the table. That's what we're trying to figure out. It appears the local management team has been handling complaints internally without escalating them to corporate. Another board member, Patricia Williams, shook her head in disgust. You mean they've been covering up discrimination complaints? For how long? We're still investigating, but it looks like at least 3 years, Rebecca replied grimly. Meanwhile, Derek Patterson was attempting damage control from his lawyer's cramped office. The hastily arranged press conference was a disaster from the start. Sweaty and disheveled, Derek sat next to his nervous attorney while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. My client was simply enforcing established company grooming policies, the lawyer began weakly. A reporter immediately cut him off. What company policy allows managers to physically cut guests' hair? Derek leaned toward the microphone, his voice cracking with stress. This is all a huge misunderstanding. I made one small mistake in judgment, and now my entire life is being destroyed by the media. One mistake? Another reporter pressed. What about the discrimination complaints that have been filed against you over the past several years? Derek's face flushed red. Those were all resolved through proper channels. This is nothing but a witch hunt designed to ruin an innocent man's career. The press conference fell apart when Derek stormed out after being asked about the specific employees who had filed complaints. His lawyer chased after him, leaving the reporters with no answers and even more questions. At the local police station, Chief Martinez faced his own media circus. Officers had reviewed the viral footage, but so far no charges had been filed. We're conducting a thorough investigation, he told the assembled reporters. We're exploring all possible charges, including assault and potential civil rights violations. Will this be investigated as a hate crime? A reporter called out. Chief Martinez looked uncomfortable. We're reviewing all aspects of the incident. No decisions have been made regarding specific charges. Back at the Grand Vista Hotel, news vans lined the street and reporters crowded the sidewalk. The lobby that had been the scene of Derek's downfall was now swarming with journalists trying to interview anyone who had witnessed the incident. Maria Santos, now wearing a temporary acting general manager name tag, did her best to handle the chaos while maintaining normal hotel operations. Every few minutes, her phone buzzed with notifications as the story continued to spread across the internet. The viral wildfire was just beginning to burn. The Washington Hospitality Group investigation room looked like a war zone. Rebecca Carter had transformed the entire conference room into a command center, with laptops displaying spreadsheets, printed emails scattered across every surface, and whiteboards covered with timelines and organizational charts. Simone sat at the head of the table, her hair now professionally styled to hide the damage Derek had done, reviewing documents that painted an increasingly horrifying picture. "It's worse than we thought," Rebecca said, opening her laptop to display a demographic analysis. Grand Vista Hotel employment data over the past 3 years shows a clear pattern. The chart on the screen was damning. Management positions were 87% white, 13% minority. Frontline staff positions were 65% minority, 35% white. But the promotion rates told the real story. White employees were promoted at 2.3 times the rate of minority employees with identical qualifications, Rebecca continued, even when controlling for experience, education, and performance reviews. Simone leaned forward, studying the data. "Show me the performance review disparities." Rebecca clicked to the next screen. This is where it gets really ugly. Minority employees consistently received lower scores on subjective categories like professional appearance and cultural fit, even when their objective performance metrics were higher. She opened a folder filled with printed emails. But these internal communications from Patterson to his supervisors are what really tell the story. The first email appeared on the projection screen, dated 18 months earlier. "Team, reminder that we need to maintain brand consistency in our public spaces. Use discretion when certain guests gather in lobby areas. Professional judgment required." Derek. "Professional judgment," Simone said bitterly. "Right." Rebecca scrolled to another email from Derek to the HR department. "Keisha Williams may be qualified on paper, but she doesn't project the executive presence our clientele expects. Let's table her promotion indefinitely." "There are dozens of these," Rebecca said, flipping through the printed stack. "All using coded language, nothing explicitly racist, but the pattern is unmistakable when you see them together." She pulled up the financial records that made Simone's blood run cold. Settlement payments over the past 3 years total $400,000. 3 separate discrimination cases, all handled by local legal counsel, all buried in general operating expenses. The spreadsheet showed the progression. $75,000 in 2022 for a discrimination settlement, $125,000 in 2023 for harassment, and $200,000 in 2024 for wrongful termination, all sealed with non-disclosure agreements. "How did this never reach my desk?" Simone asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. Local management has been handling everything through their own legal team. The settlements were categorized as routine business expenses. No red flags were raised at the corporate level. Rebecca's phone buzzed with another call from employees coming forward. "That's the 15th person to contact us today. We now have documented complaints spanning 5 years of Derek's management." Across town, investigative journalist Sarah Carter was conducting her own deep dive into the story. Her desk at the Chicago Tribune was covered with USB drives, printed documents, and photographs that sources had been secretly sending her all day. "What we've uncovered goes far beyond one incident," she told her camera crew as they prepared for a live broadcast. "Internal documents show a systematic pattern of discrimination that was actively covered up by hotel management." She held up a leaked memo marked "Confidential Legal Strategy." This document outlines how discrimination complaints were handled. Quote, "Recommend settling quickly, requiring NDAS with no admission of wrongdoing. The cost of litigation exceeds settlement amounts." The memo continued with chilling corporate calculation. "Standard language should emphasize this is a business decision, not an admission of liability." Priority is protecting company reputation and limiting financial exposure. At the FBI field office downtown, Agent Torres was reviewing evidence that Simone's legal team had voluntarily provided. The federal investigation was moving faster than anyone expected, thanks to the company's full cooperation and the overwhelming amount of documentation. Based on the evidence you've provided, we're opening a formal civil rights investigation, Agent Torres told Simone during an afternoon meeting. The pattern of discrimination appears to extend beyond individual incidents into systematic civil rights violations. How widespread could this be? Simone asked. That's what we intend to find out. Your company's continued cooperation will be essential, but I have to warn you that this investigation may uncover additional liability issues. Meanwhile, Derek was desperately trying to destroy evidence at his apartment. Shredded documents filled garbage bags as he frantically went through files he had improperly taken home. His phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and people he didn't recognize. "No comment!" he screamed into the phone before hanging up. "No fucking comment to any of you!" His wife Sarah watched from the doorway, holding her phone which displayed a news article. Pattern of discrimination. Former hotel manager accused of systematic harassment. "Derek, did you really do all the things they're saying?" she asked quietly. "It's all lies," he shouted, continuing to shred papers. "Disgruntled employees making up stories for money. None of this would be happening if that woman hadn't set me up." Anonymous interviews with former employees were already airing on local news. Faces obscured and voices disguised, they painted a picture of workplace harassment that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. "He told me I was too ethnic for the front desk," one former employee said. "Said I should work in housekeeping where guests wouldn't see me as much." Another voice added, "When a guest called me a racial slur, Derek said I was being too sensitive and needed to develop thicker skin if I wanted to work in hospitality." The evidence was mounting into an avalanche that would bury Derek's career forever. The security alarm at Simone's Lincoln Park home screamed through the night at 2 a.m. She jolted awake, immediately reaching for her phone to check the security system. The alert read, "Perimeter breach, front gate," in urgent red letters. Moving to her bedroom window, Simone peered through the blinds and felt her blood turn to ice. Her pristine front lawn had been vandalized with spray-painted slurs in jagged red letters, "Nachar, go home," and "Fake victim bitch." Toilet paper hung from her oak trees like grotesque decorations, and what looked like eggs had been thrown against her front door. "How did they get past the security gate?" she asked her security company over the phone, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest. "Ma'am, the breach log shows someone used a valid access code. This had to be someone with inside information about your security system." The chilling realization hit her. Someone close to her, someone with access to her personal information, had betrayed her to these attackers. At Washington Hospitality Group headquarters the next morning, the situation deteriorated further. Simone arrived to find chaos in the IT department. Computer screens displayed error messages, and technicians worked frantically to restore corrupted data. "They got into our HR database," the lead IT technician explained, sweat beading on his forehead. "Employee records, investigation files, internal communications, everything related to the discrimination cases has been compromised or deleted." "How is that possible?" Simone demanded. "This wasn't some random hacker." "Someone with administrative access credentials did this from the inside. They knew exactly what they were looking for and how to find it." Rebecca burst into the office, her face pale with panic. "Simone, we have a major problem. The confidential employee statements from our investigation have been leaked to Derek's legal team. Names, addresses, personal information of everyone who came forward. That's impossible. Those files were encrypted and password protected. Someone with board-level access copied everything before the hack. 3 employees who gave testimony have already been contacted at their homes. There have been threats, intimidation attempts. Maria Santos had her car tires slashed in her driveway last night." Rebecca's phone rang, and she answered with shaking hands. "Hello? What? Are you absolutely sure?" Her face went white as she listened. "Oh my God!" She hung up and turned to Simone with terror in her eyes. "That was Officer Martinez from the police department. Someone sent photographs to Maria's house, pictures of her 8-year-old daughter walking to school with a note saying they know her route and her schedule." The weight of responsibility crashed down on Simone. Her fight for justice was putting innocent people in danger. At a secure location across town, Maria Santos sat in a lawyer's office with tears streaming down her face. The acting general manager, who had shown such strength in the hotel lobby, now looked broken and terrified. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to her attorney. "They know where I live." "They know my daughter's school. Someone followed my husband to work yesterday." "Maria, your testimony is crucial to the federal investigation," the lawyer said gently. "Without your statement, Derek might escape serious consequences." "You don't understand." Maria's voice cracked with desperation. "They sent me photos of Sophia at the playground. They know which swing she likes to use. I have a family to protect. I can't risk their safety in this case." She pulled out her phone and showed the lawyer a text message that had arrived that morning. It was a photo of her daughter's classroom window, taken from outside the school, with the message, "Pretty little girl. I would hate for anything to happen to her." The FBI had reached the same conclusion about the escalating threats. Agent Torres sat across from Simone in a secure government building, photos of white nationalist websites spread across the table between them. "Ms. Washington, we strongly recommend you accept federal protection immediately," he said grimly. "Our investigation shows Derek Patterson has been in contact with several extremist organizations since the incident went viral." "This is America," Simone said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "I shouldn't need FBI protection because I was assaulted in my own hotel." Agent Torres pushed a surveillance photo across the table. "These are members of a white nationalist group called the Heritage Brotherhood. They've made specific, credible threats against you and your company. Derek's been exchanging messages with their leadership." The photo showed Derek meeting with 3 men in military-style clothing outside a gun shop in suburban Illinois. The timestamp was from 2 days after the viral incident. "They're not just angry, Ms. Washington. They're organized, and they're planning something." The darkness was closing in from all sides. The turning point came from an unexpected source. At 7 in the morning, Simone's phone rang with a call from Dr. Angela Davis, CEO of Meridian Hotels, Washington Hospitality Group's biggest competitor. "Simone, I'm calling because what happened to you could have happened to any of us," Angela said without preamble. "I've been dealing with similar issues in my own company, and I think it's time we stood together." Within hours, a coalition was forming that Derek and his allies had never anticipated. CEOs from major hotel chains, restaurant groups, and hospitality companies were publicly declaring their support for Simone and announcing their own internal investigations into discriminatory practices. "This isn't about competition anymore," said Marcus Thompson, CEO of Premier Resort Group, during an impromptu press conference. "This is about the soul of our industry. We're implementing new hiring practices, bias training, and anonymous reporting systems across all our properties." The corporate solidarity sent shockwaves through the business world, but the real breakthrough came from within the Grand Vista Hotel itself. James Mitchell, the security chief who had been forced to escort Simone to the front desk, finally found his courage. "I can't live with myself anymore," he told Rebecca Carter during a secret meeting in a downtown coffee shop. "I have security footage that Derek doesn't know exists." James pulled out a tablet and showed Rebecca camera angles from the hotel's newer surveillance system that Derek hadn't been aware of. He only knew about the old cameras. "We upgraded 6 months ago with additional coverage. I've got everything from multiple angles, including audio." The unedited footage was devastating. It showed Derek's approach to Simone while deliberately ignoring white guests doing exactly the same thing. The audio captured every word of his racist commentary, including phrases he had claimed never to have said. "There's more," James continued, his voice shaking. "I've been keeping records of every discriminatory incident I witnessed. Derek told me to delete security footage of guest complaints, but I kept copies on my personal drive." He showed Rebecca a folder containing dozens of video files. Minority guests being followed by security, being asked for additional identification, being told they didn't belong in certain areas of the hotel. "I documented everything because I knew someday I'd need proof." Meanwhile, an anonymous insider was leaking even more damaging evidence. Derek's personal text messages from his work phone had been forwarded to investigative journalist Sarah Carter, and they painted a picture of systematic racism that was worse than anyone had imagined. The text thread with his assistant manager Brad was particularly damning. "Make sure the new hire for the front desk is someone who fits our image, if you know what I mean," Derek had written. Brad replied, "Got it, boss," keeping it professional looking. Derek responded with, "Exactly. We can't have the lobby looking like a rap video." Another exchange showed Derek's instructions to housekeeping supervisors. "When certain guests complain about service, tell them we're looking into it, but don't actually do anything. They'll usually give up and check out early." Financial forensics experts hired by the FBI were uncovering an even more sinister pattern. Derek had been systematically overbilling minority-owned vendors while giving preferential treatment to white-owned companies. Invoices showed identical services being charged at rates 20 to 30% higher when provided by minority contractors. He was running a two-tier pricing system, forensic accountant Lisa Rodriguez explained to Agent Torres. Same services, same quality, but minority vendors were consistently charged premium rates while white vendors got standard pricing or discounts. The evidence extended to employment practices as well. Payroll records showed that minority employees were more likely to have their hours cut during slow periods, less likely to receive overtime opportunities, and systematically excluded from the profit-sharing bonuses that management-level employees received. Hotel workers across the country were finding their own courage to speak out. The hashtag Hotel Workers Unite was trending as employees from major chains shared their own stories of discrimination and harassment. A former Grand Vista employee named Keisha Williams, the same woman whose promotion Derek had blocked in his emails, agreed to an on-camera interview with Sarah Carter. "I worked there for 4 years, Keisha said, her face no longer hidden. I watched Derek systematically drive out every person of color who showed leadership potential. He would create impossible standards, document minor infractions, and build cases for termination." She pulled out her own documentation. "I kept records, too. Performance reviews where he'd mark me down for attitude problems when I'd suggest more efficient procedures. Write-ups for being 2 minutes late when white employees regularly arrived 15 minutes late with no consequences." Anonymous donations were flooding in to support the employees who had been brave enough to come forward. A GoFundMe campaign for Maria Santos and her family had raised over $200,000 in protective funds. Legal aid organizations were offering free representation to any hotel worker who wanted to file discrimination complaints. The tide was turning, but the most powerful evidence was yet to come. Derek's own lawyer, increasingly disturbed by what he was learning about his client, made a decision that would seal Derek's fate forever. During what Derek thought was a confidential attorney-client conversation, he had admitted to far worse behavior than anyone knew. What Derek didn't realize was that his lawyer had determined their relationship was being used to perpetuate ongoing crimes, breaking attorney-client privilege. The recording of Derek's confession was about to become public, and it would destroy any remaining sympathy for his position. In his own words, caught on tape, Derek was about to condemn himself beyond any possibility of redemption. The allies had gathered, the evidence was overwhelming, and justice was finally within reach. The protest outside Grand Vista Hotel began with just 12 people holding hand-painted signs. Within 6 hours, over 3,000 demonstrators filled the streets of downtown Chicago, turning the hotel into the epicenter of a nationwide movement for hospitality industry reform. No justice, no peace. Hotel workers deserve dignity. The chant echoed off the glass towers surrounding the Grand Vista as protesters of all races and ages linked arms across Michigan Avenue. Local news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live footage of the massive crowd to millions of viewers. Maria Santos, who had been too frightened to testify just days earlier, stood at a makeshift podium with her 8-year-old daughter Sophia beside her. The FBI protection detail had given her the security she needed to finally speak her truth. "I've worked in hotels for 15 years, Maria told the crowd, her voice amplified by speakers and live-streamed to over 2 million viewers across social media platforms. What happened to Ms. Washington happens to workers like me every single day. We're told our accents are unprofessional, our hair is wrong, our skin is too dark for guest-facing positions." The crowd roared its approval as Sophia held up a sign reading, "My mom is a hero," in bright purple crayon. Across the country, solidarity protests were erupting at major hotel chains in New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Miami. Workers who had been silenced for years were finally finding their voices, sharing stories that created a devastating picture of systemic discrimination across the entire hospitality industry. The hashtag boycott discrimination was trending worldwide with over 15 million interactions. Major convention organizers were canceling bookings at hotels with documented discrimination complaints. Travel bloggers with millions of followers were pledging to only stay at properties with verified diversity and inclusion policies. Corporate sponsors were fleeing from any association with Derek's defenders. 3 companies that had initially supported due process quietly withdrew their statements after facing massive social media backlash and customer boycotts. Inside the hotel, the impact was immediate and dramatic. Reservations were being canceled faster than the overwhelmed front desk could process them. The phone rang constantly with angry guests demanding refunds and explanations. Several major corporate accounts that generated millions in annual revenue had already terminated their contracts. But the most powerful moment came when Congresswoman Patricia Johnson announced from the steps of the Capitol building that she was introducing the Hotel Worker Protection Act, legislation that would require federal oversight of discrimination complaints in the hospitality industry. "What we've seen in Chicago is not an isolated incident," Congresswoman Johnson declared to a packed press conference. "It's a window into systematic abuse that has been hidden for too long. This legislation will ensure that hotel workers have federal protection and that companies can no longer bury discrimination complaints with secret settlements." The live streams were bringing the movement into homes across America. Families gathered around phones and tablets, watching in real time as hotel workers shared their stories. Comment sections filled with similar experiences from viewers who had never spoken about their own workplace discrimination. "I was told I couldn't work the front desk because my hijab made guests uncomfortable," wrote one commenter. This was at a major chain in Dallas. "I quit the next day." Another viewer shared, "My manager said my natural hair was distracting and I needed to straighten it or work in the back office where guests couldn't see me. That was 3 years ago and I'm still angry." The economic pressure was becoming impossible to ignore. Washington Hospitality Group's stock price had dropped 12% as investors worried about long-term damage to the brand. Competitors were openly poaching both customers and employees by emphasizing their own diversity initiatives. Derek, watching the protests from his apartment window, could see his entire world collapsing in real time. The crowd below was chanting his name, but not in support. They wanted justice, accountability, and an end to the system that had protected people like him for too long. Local police had cordoned off several blocks around the hotel, but the demonstration remained peaceful and powerful. Speakers from civil rights organizations, labor unions, and hospitality worker advocacy groups took turns addressing the crowd as news cameras captured every word. The movement had reached a tipping point. Tomorrow, Derek would face the full force of federal justice, and the entire country would be watching. The reckoning had arrived. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago had never seen anything like it. Over 5,000 people filled the plaza outside, holding signs and chanting as Derek Patterson's criminal trial reached its climax. News vans from every major network lined the streets, their satellite dishes pointing skyward. Inside the packed courtroom, Derek sat hunched at the defendant's table, a shadow of the arrogant man who had wielded scissors just weeks earlier. His expensive suit couldn't hide the hollow look in his eyes or the way his hands shook. Simone Washington took the witness stand with quiet dignity, her hair professionally styled, but still showing subtle signs of the damage Derek had inflicted. The courtroom fell silent as she placed her hand on the Bible. "Dr. Washington," the federal prosecutor began, "please tell the jury what happened on March 15th at the Grand Vista Hotel." Simone's voice was steady and clear as she recounted the humiliation, the hair-cutting, and the systematic discrimination that investigation had revealed. But it was her impact statement that brought tears throughout the courtroom. "This wasn't just about my hair," she said, looking directly at the jury. "This was about every black woman who's been told she doesn't belong in spaces she has every right to occupy. Every person of color who's been made to feel ashamed of who they are." Derek's defense attorney made a desperate attempt to portray his client as a scapegoat, but the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage from multiple angles, discriminatory text messages, financial records showing systematic bias, and testimony from dozens of employees painted an undeniable picture. Then came the moment that sealed Derek's fate forever. "Your Honor," the prosecutor announced, "we have one final piece of evidence." A recorded conversation between the defendant and his attorney, in which attorney-client privilege was waived due to ongoing criminal activity. Derek's face went white as his own voice filled the courtroom through the sound system. The recording was crystal clear, captured during what Derek thought was a confidential legal consultation. "Look, I know what I did was wrong," Derek's voice said from the speakers. "But you have to understand, I've been doing this kind of thing for years, making sure certain types of people know their place." His lawyer's voice responded with shock. "Derek, are you telling me you've been systematically discriminating against minority employees and guests?" "Of course I have," Derek's recorded voice continued with chilling casualness. "That's how you maintain standards. You can't let these people think they belong in the same spaces as real customers. I kept the numbers up so the company looked the other way." The courtroom erupted. Spectators gasped. Derek's current lawyer buried his face in his hands, and jury members stared at the defendant with undisguised disgust. Derek tried to stand, tried to object, but his voice was drowned out by chaos. "I had a whole system," Derek's voice continued on the recording. "Performance reviews, scheduling conflicts, impossible standards. It worked perfectly until that bitch decided to play victim." Judge Martinez slammed her gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but the damage was done. In his own words, Derek had confessed not just to assault, but to years of systematic civil rights violations. The jury deliberated for exactly 1 hour and 47 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood with a grave expression. "On the charge of assault in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of civil rights violations under federal law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to deny civil rights, we find the defendant guilty." Derek collapsed into his chair as if he'd been shot. The courtroom exploded with cheers from the gallery, while protesters outside erupted in celebration as news of the verdict spread through the crowd. Judge Martinez's sentencing was swift and decisive. "Mr. Patterson, your actions represent not just poor judgment, but a systematic campaign of hatred and discrimination that has harmed countless individuals. I sentence you to 2 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. and a lifetime ban from working in any management capacity in the hospitality industry. As federal marshals approached to take Derek into custody, he turned toward Simone one final time. The look of pure hatred in his eyes was captured by every camera in the room, ensuring that his final moment of freedom would be remembered as a portrait of unrepentant racism. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists as protesters outside chanted, "Justice! Justice! Justice!" Derek Patterson was led away in chains. His reign of terror finally ended. 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable. Maria Santos wore a genuine general manager name tag at Grand Vista Hotel, greeting guests with her natural warmth. The hotel had become a symbol of positive change. Washington Hospitality Group established a $50 million settlement fund for discrimination victims. Over 300 workers came forward, each case addressed with full transparency. The Hotel Worker Protection Act became federal law with bipartisan support. Hospitality companies must now report discrimination complaints to authorities. Secret settlements are banned. Anonymous hotlines protect workers from retaliation. Simone Washington was named Time magazine's Person of the Year, but her proudest achievement was the ground-level change. Hotel workers nationwide were organizing, demanding dignity, winning protections that once seemed impossible. This was never about revenge, Simone told the National Civil Rights Convention. This was about ensuring this never happens to anyone else. Derek Patterson served his sentence at a federal facility in Illinois. Appeals denied, wife divorced him, children refused visits. The man who once held absolute power now worked in the prison kitchen, finally understanding powerlessness. The viral video reached 50 million views across all platforms. It became a case study in business schools and civil rights courses, showing how individual courage sparks systematic change. The most important aftermath wasn't in headlines or legislation. It was thousands of hotel workers walking tall, dignity protected by law. Young black women wearing natural hair without fear. Knowledge that justice, however delayed, could prevail. As Simone said in speeches, sometimes it takes being broken down to build something better. The movement that began with scissors and hatred became a force for equality and hope. After credit beat. 3 weeks later, a similar incident occurred at a competing Atlanta hotel. A black businessman was told his appearance didn't match standards. Within hours, "Justice isn't finished" was trending. The fight continued. Like and subscribe if this moves you. Share your workplace discrimination experiences below. Hit notifications because we're covering Atlanta next week. Derek Patterson's story proves justice always finds a way.